In this lesson, we'll talk about some of the display options in ZBrush. So here is our little worm again. So there are different options here for how we're actually looking at the models on our canvas. We talked about the perspective button. We can add perspective distortion or take that away. We also talked about adding the floor grid. We can also go up into draw, and we can change that, so we can turn off and on perspective. We can also turn the floor off and on. We can change the size of the floor, how many tiles. We can also change the elevation of the floor. We'll talk more about reference images as we go on. We can also change the angle of view of our camera. So if we want to modify that, you can see how that perspective adjusts accordingly. We can also look at the wireframe of our models we talked about earlier. It's going to be under transform, and we can turn on polyframe. There's also a button down here at the bottom of this right shelf for polyframe. And the polygroups, if you see different polygons that are different colors, those are going to be your polygroups. And we'll talk about polygroups in more depth later on, but they're going to be really key in creating our meshes here in ZBrush. It's just basically kind of a selection mask of different polygons. All right, so we can turn that off and on. You can also, by right-clicking, access some of these options in this pop-up, so I can turn those turn that off there. Now, this contains multiple objects, right? So we've got, just like the demo soldier, we've got a mesh here, we've got the eyes, and all these separate pieces. We haven't really talked about putting together separate pieces yet. We will cover that in much more depth later on. The key is, if you have multiple pieces like this, you can make some of them transparent. So if I've got this main body selected and I choose transparent, that will make everything else transparent. So sometimes you have a lot of detail going on, a lot of pieces in, and you really want to kind of clean it up visually so that you can see what you're doing. You can turn on transparency, then you still get kind of a reference of what's going on. If you want a little bit better indication of where things are, you can turn on ghost transparency, and that'll give you a little bit more of a look of where things are. So you can see if the teeth are in the right spot, you can see how the eyes match up, depending on what tool you have selected. The one I have selected is the body, so everything else is transparent. So you can access that at the bottom of this shelf as well, or under transform, and you can turn off your transparency or ghost transparency here, and also your polyframe. There's also an option called expose here. Let me go in here. Right here, expose view, and Shift X is the hotkey for that. If I hit that, all the different subtools are kind of blown apart so that we can see them. So you can see all the different pieces of your mesh. Now it's just a temporary thing. You can go ahead and hit that, bring those down back together, and that will allow you to kind of, if you have parts of your model and you want to get kind of an exploded view of those, you can take advantage of that. You can also come in here and change the amount, and using this little slider, and you can change the axes as well. Now on a lot of these tools that we're using, and we'll cover this later, but just because we can see it here, you can see this XYZ. One of them's grayed out, one of them's a lighter color. This is just how you're going to select the particular axis that you want whatever tool it is that you're using to actually use. So in this case it's in the X and the Y, but I could turn on Z as well. And so anytime you see these XYZ next to something, that's going to enable you to actually select one or more of those axes to actually use. And also, if you get off of your model a little bit, you can always frame it up back into your canvas. You can also hit F to kind of frame that particular tool that you're looking at. So if you get something that's kind of lost a little bit and you don't know where it is, you can use this button, or you can hit F on your keyboard to kind of frame that up into your canvas. And one other cool thing that you can use as far as the display, and this kind of goes along with working with your reference images, is you can actually turn the entire interface transparent. So if you have something that you want to reference that is on your screen behind your ZBrush interface, just bring up an image from whatever search engine you're using, or you've drawn something and you scanned it in, you can bring that up. And if I go ahead and up here in the top menu right next to the quick save button, you see the see-through slider. So if I turn that up, you can see I've actually just got our website loaded up behind as an example, but if you could have reference images back there, whatever you want, and then if you wanted to kind of make that a little bit more transparent, then I could work in here to match up the reference that we're working with. So that's kind of cool. You can make the entire interface transparent if you want to. Okay, so that's a look at some of the things you can do to modify how you're viewing your models here in ZBrush. Again, some of those things are located under Draw, the Draw palette, and also Transform palette, and many of those options are also available here on your right-hand shelf. They're able to activate, or to use rather. All right, so the next thing that we want to talk about is setting up reference images, so grid reference, using grids like this floor to set up reference. So sometimes you'll have models that you want to be able to build from a particular image and you want to be able to match it up. So how can we start to add those images? So go ahead and do that next.